Buchi is an iconic figure in our lives, both here in the UK for African women on the African continent and globally. She was a global figure when she started to write because her voice was extremely and extraordinarily special and different. I have so many words that I could use to describe Buchi, but because we're here because of her, and many of our very wonderful, great speakers are here from all over the world to celebrate Buchi's life, I will limit myself to just one word and say that she was a courageous woman, a very courageous woman. And we may take her courage for granted now, but she opened the doors for very many of us as African women, as literary people, and as writers. There is a personal dimension to this because some of the people in this room are Buchi's family, such as Sylvester, and I'd like to thank them for the graciousness and generosity they have offered us in sharing this wonderful celebration with them. So without further ado, I will introduce Shayla Ruiz, who's not a stranger to the stage. She's the Deputy Director of the Royal Africa Society, which is one of the partners of this wonderful gathering, and she will take you through the program of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Wangui. I was sort of getting quite emotional there already. So as Wangui said, my name is Shayla Ruiz. I'm the Deputy Director at the Royal African Society, and welcome to you all. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to be able to introduce the day. So this day-long event is presented by the Buchi Emecheta Foundation and Omenala Press in partnership with the Royal African Society, the Centre of African Studies at the University of London, the Igbo Conference, Sable Litmac, and Africult. And it has been made possible thanks to the support of Arts Council England. I'll start off by saying a few words about the Royal African Society for those of you who don't know of us or our work. So we are an inclusive membership charity based here in London, just down the road at SOAS. We believe that the world would be a more equal, just, and interesting place if Africa had a louder voice in global affairs, and we work to that end. We were founded over 100 years ago, and today we run programs that cover 5 main areas. So that's academia, business, politics, arts and culture, and more recently, education. Through our events and festivals and publications, as well as our digital channels, we reach a network of more than 1 million people globally, which grows every year. Our membership is open to anyone who would like to join. I know that some of you are already RAS members, but if you're not and you're interested in becoming a part of the society and its network, please check out our desk. There'll be information on display during the lunch break so that you can hear all about what we do. Some of you may know Africa Writes, which is our annual festival celebrating the best contemporary African literature, and that was actually launched here in this very building in 2012, and it now takes place at the British Library every summer over a long weekend. The festival dates for this year have already been set. They are Friday the 29th of June to Sunday the 1st of July. So please take note, mark those dates in your diary, and we hope to see you there. Now on to housekeeping. This event is being audio recorded and will be available on our Mixcloud account in the next few weeks. Photographs will be taken during the course of the day, so do alert us if you would not like to have your picture taken. We've got a wonderful team of volunteers, and they'll be here to help throughout the day, so please ask them any questions you may have. They'll also be filming short videos for social media, so feel free to get involved with that. We would also like you to keep the conversation going online on your social media channels, but we would kindly ask you all to turn your phones to silent so as to not disturb the panelists or other participants. The suggested hashtag for today's event is Celebrating Buchi Emecheta, the title of the event, and our Twitter handle details are on the screen just behind me. And finally, just to say that as Wangui mentioned, I won't go through the program of the day, but we do have a very packed program, and we're running to a very tight schedule, so please help us to keep to time where you can by coming back into the auditorium when you're told to. And before I hand over to Sylvester, Buchi Emecheta's son, who has been sort of the driving force behind this event, I would just like to say that I never, unfortunately, got the chance to meet Buchi Emecheta in person, but she was definitely part of the sort of magic circle of inspiring African women writers that I discovered when I was doing my MA at SOAS. So it's really a true delight and pleasure to be part of this magnificent gathering, which is celebrating her life, her work, and the contribution, the invaluable contribution she made, not just to African or British literature, but to global literature. So that's it from me. Over to you, Sylvester. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Sylvester Onyango. I'm the first son of Buchi Emecheta, who sadly passed away almost a year ago today. It was on the 25th of January, 2017. It was a very, very sad occasion for myself, for my family, for everyone who knew her and loved her. But one strangely good thing that's come out of all this is that I've realized in the course of this last year, doing lots of talks and tributes on her behalf, just how popular she was and how many people around the world knew her. And I think it's testimony by this event itself and the number of people who actually responded positively. I met people already this morning who said they just had to come here because they wanted to acknowledge Buchi. Because she was someone who was really, really important in her time, 1970s, 1980s. A very, very inspiring figure as a writer, as a human being. She was very passionate. She was an activist, a prolific writer, incredible writer. But unfortunately, it's one of those things, if you don't sort of promote people, if you don't sort of support them, then their name can actually sort of fade. And I think part of what I've realized when she passed away was that it was really important to maintain her legacy and to make sure that people didn't forget her. I've had the opportunity to reread her books, because at the end of the day, it comes down to her books, and that's the message that she passed on to all of us. And they're just incredible. I mean, the early ones particularly. I was actually in some of them, so I can actually... So I'm a bit biased there, but it's quite amazing to read about my experience from her perspective. And just realized what a great writer she was, because I knew her as my mother, as a person, human being. I was aware that she did write, but the writing was very much a domestic thing. It was part of our world. We didn't think of it as anything special. So it was only later, as we grew up as kids, we saw what it was that she'd actually achieved. We actually realized that she wasn't just a mum, she was much, much more than that. She was quite a phenomenal character. Also in this last year, I've met so many people who knew her, and the stories they told about her was actually quite inspiring to me and actually quite interesting, because I didn't know that side of her life. I wasn't aware that I knew that she'd lectured, she was an academic, but I didn't actually see her in that particular role. So to meet people who knew her in America, in Nigeria, in Europe, and to get their stories about her has actually been quite enriching for me. So I've learned a lot. So basically, I'm grateful to everyone for the love that you're showing for Buchi, and I think today is going to be quite a great event, because I think Buchi would be happy that we're actually celebrating her name. I think she's joined the literary ancestors now, and she's looking down at us, and I think she'll be happy and pleased. So on that note, before we move on to the panels, I'd like to invite someone from the Ibuzo community, one of our elders, to come up on the stage and actually perform a libation and bless the proceedings. And hopefully we'll talk a little bit about Igbo culture and Ibuzo culture. Because my mother, apart from anything else, apart from being a writer and this international figure, she was also very, very much an Ibuzo woman. Ibuzo is a small town. It's not so small anymore. Ibuzo is a town to the east of Nigeria, near the River Niger. And I think she's one of the people who's actually put that town on the map. So if I can hand over to Winnie. Okay.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Uwala Emecheta. I'm from Ibuzo. I'm the Uwala of Ibuzo. At the same time, I'm Buchi Emecheta's cousin. We are from Umuadafe, Ibuzo. Ibuzo is somewhere in Delta State of Nigeria. That's where we come from, Oshimili local government. So with time, I'm going to say one or two things about Buchi I know. As a sister in Nigeria, we say sister, we don't know about cousins. She's a sister, a mother figure to me while she was here, while she was alive. So I'm going to do the little bit of libation, but I think what is more important to me is having a kola nut to do it. In our culture, we use kola nut to pray. And kola nut symbolizes a lot of things for us. When we break kola nut, we eat together, we pray with it, and we believe that those who eat as a communion, you will not have something negative against each other. So it's very important to us in praying to our gods. And Buchi, while she was alive, valued such ritual, I'll call it, in our community. So if we have kola nut here, do we have it yet? Okay. All right, that's okay. All right, in declaring this occasion open, I'm going to use this for libation. Fortunately, in doing our libation, or in doing prayers, we only use our mother tongue. Our ancestors and our gods don't understand any other language apart from Ibuzo language. So permit me, what I'm going to say is nothing negative. It's all positive. It's prayer. But I say it in our mother tongue. Those of you who are Catholics, you know that there are certain sacred things you say in Latin. So this is quite sacred to us. So I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it in Ibuzo, right? Then, Sylvester. In Senegal, if I'm a may. Nega Bialiowa. Buchi. Omega if all look for Galum, never. So Chuga and Alumendo and Andoka. Nasa as in more than Ibuzo, one Alumendo and Andoka. Nasa as in Dinchano Nebe. Unu Messia Fair, Unugananudo. Ahogadonia Bonama. All I'm saying is that it will be well with you all. And where Buchi is lying, I know she's in the right place, and God will receive her, in her bosom. So we pray to our ancestors, to our gods, and to everything. Thank you. And in my culture, as an Obu man, I pray with two hands. I'm the only person allowed to do it in my tradition. If you know Ibuzo, I'm taught in hierarchy from Ibuzo, in the kingdom of Ibuzo. So I'm allowed to pray with double hands, yeah? So I declare this occasion open, and enjoy your day. Thank you very
much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're probably wondering why I came up here with the Uwala. Within the United Kingdom, we have a community development union called Ibuzo Community Development Union, and that's ICDU. I'm the president of that union in UK and Ireland. And our late sister, mother, grandmother, auntie, the prolific writer, was a very, very prominent member of that union. One of the unique things about late Buchi Emecheta is that it doesn't matter what she does, she always remembered home. So we are all here today to celebrate her legacy, what she has left behind. So I wish you all a very, very happy gathering. I'm Tony Uwaje. Thank you very much.
Join me again in thanking the Dapioka for the day. It's a very special thing, and we are now in contact with Ibuza culture, for those of us who haven't had that fortune, again, because of Buchi. It's my great honor and delight to ask, in the tradition of Buchi and words, to introduce Ironisen Okoji, who is a writer and arts project manager. Ironisen? And her debut novel, Butterfly Fish, please come up. Very nice to meet you. Welcome. Ironisen's debut novel, Butterfly Fish, won a Betty Trask Award and was shortlisted for the Edinburgh International Fish Book Award. Her work has been featured in The Observer, The Guardian, the BBC, the Huffington Post, among other publications. Her short stories have been published internationally, and she has presented at the London Short Story Festival by Ben Okri as a dynamic writing talent to watch, and was featured in the Evening Standard magazine as one of London's exciting new authors. Her short story collection, Speak, Gigantula, published by Jacaranda Books, was shortlisted for the Edghill Short Story Prize and Jalak Prize, the Saboteur Awards, and nominated for a Shirley Jackson Award. She's online, and we will give you her email link, which is in your programs with her bio. And I just want to say one of the most exciting things about Buchi is the intergenerational links, and we thought it very important to start with Ironisen.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm really delighted to be here to celebrate Buchi's legacy. Buchi is someone who's been quite special to me in terms of my development as a writer. So I discovered her when I was 13, I think 13 or 14, and started reading her books. But not only was I excited to read the books, it was also books that I shared with my mother, and we would have conversations around the books. We would talk about the themes in the books, and more importantly, we saw ourselves reflected, and that didn't happen that often. So her books really became very, very special to me, and I would often visit them again and again as I grew up, just in terms of what she achieved, and having a black woman of that stature have that body of work made me feel like it was possible. So I'm really honoured to read from The Bride Price today, which I think in the current climate of female empowerment still feels relevant because of the rebellious heroine. So I'm going to read a bit of that today for you. So this is from the opening chapter. Akuna fitted the key into the keyhole, turned it this way and that, pushed open the whitewashed door, then stood there, very still. For right in the middle of the room was their father, staring back at them wordlessly. He stood there, hat in hand, properly khakied in his work clothes, and looking very much like a guilty criminal caught stealing. Akuna and her brother Nando stepped inside their one-room apartment, still staring at him, mutely demanding explanation. You ought to be at work, their silent gazes seemed to be saying. You ought not to be here. You ought to be at the loco yard with your mates, not here standing in the middle of the room, scaring us so. But if their father had any explanations to make, he was biding his time. The boy Nando was 11. He was tall for his age, with the narrow build of his mother. At school, he had just started to use ink, and this he was determined to let everybody know. Writing with ink was to him an academic achievement. For though he was very clever at other arts, he was very slow in bookwork. His fingers were always smeared with ink. It oozed from its bottle onto his hands, some onto his khaki school uniform, some he even rubbed on his close-cropped hair. And if you asked him why he did that, he would reply, "Ink makes my hair blacker." He had a good sense of humour, just like their mother, Ma Blackie. Ma Blackie was a giant of a woman. She was so tall and straight that her few enemies called her the palm tree woman. Her jet black skin had earned her the nickname Blackie the Black when she was a little girl, and nothing about her had changed much now that she had a family of her own. In fact, her blackness was even glossier. So her neighbours and friends added the respectful title, Ma, to her name. And she became Ma Blackie, not only to her children, but to all. If you came down to Akunwumi Street and said you were looking for a Ma, which title many women shared, your informer would probably ask, could it be that you mean Ma Blackie? But Ma Blackie, though always smiling and loudly cheerful, had a family problem. She was very slow in getting herself pregnant again. Since her husband returned from Burma, when the war ended some 5 years before, she had not been pregnant like other wives whose husband had gone abroad to fight Hitler. Her husband, Ezekiel Odia, had sent her to all the native doctors he could afford in Lagos, but still no more children. He even encouraged her to join the Cherubim and Seraphim sect. These people babbled their prayers to God in a frenzied kind of way, but to no avail. Ma Blackie was not pregnant. In despair, she decided to go home to their own town, Ibuza, to placate their Obishi river goddess into giving her some babies. While Ma Blackie was in Ibuza recharging her fertility, Akuna and Nanando were left to take care of themselves and their father. Ezekiel Odia, whom they often called Na, the Igbo word for father, was to keep his job at the loco yard where he worked as a head molder. This position of responsibility had been given to him out of respect for the fact that he had been to the war, and he guarded it with his very soul. He would wake very early each morning, bustling himself about in their one room, waking everybody else up, in his haste, dropping this, picking up that, shouting for the other in his little voice. In size, he was a little man too, and people wondered how he had come to marry such a giant of a woman. The answer, maybe, was that like most Igbo men of his generation, he had taken his wife when she was still a young girl. The trouble with Ezekiel's bride was that she seemed never to stop growing. However, such natural imbalance did nothing to disrupt the marriage. All it did was to make Ezekiel Oda acquire a funny way of standing on his toes when making a point. So on this particular day, when his 2 children had sped home from school, expecting to be greeted by an empty room as usual, they were stunned to see him, standing there, flat on his feet, in the center of the room, his eyes bloodshot with tiny red worm-like crisscrosses in them. He was nervously twisting and retwisting his old felt hat, uncertain still of what he was going to tell his children and of how to begin. Akuna came closer to him. She was only 13, but she had realized quite a while before that all was not well in her family. Many a time she had heard other women living in the same compound make songs of her Ma Blackie's childlessness. She had heard over and over again her Ma Blackie and her Na quarreling over this great issue of childlessness. Na would go on and on, talking in that small, sad voice of his, telling Ma, reminding her that he had to pay double the normal bride price before he was able to make Ma as his wife. He would work himself up, his little voice whining like a hungry dog's, and then drawing himself up on tiptoe, maybe hoping to add to his stature by doing so. He would remind Ma Blackie that having paid this heavy bride price, he had had their marriage sanctified by Anglicanism. And what had he to show for it all? An only son. Akuna knew that she was too insignificant to be regarded as a blessing to this unfortunate marriage. Not only was she a girl, but she was much too thin for the approval of her parents, who would rather have a strong and plump little girl for a daughter. Akuna just would not put on weight, and this made her look as if she was being starved. But she simply had not the kind of healthy appetite her brother Nanando had. And that was not the end of the disgrace she was showering on her family. If a child at the end of Akunwumi Street had chickenpox, Akuna was bound to catch it. If someone else at the bottom of the yard had malaria, Akuna would have her share too. For her, it was forever a story of today foot, tomorrow head, the day after neck, So much so that her mother many a time begged her to decide once and for all whether she was going to live or die. One thing Ma Blackie could not stand, she said over and over again, was a living dead, and Obanje. Ezekiel Odia often pitied his daughter, particularly because she took more after him than his Amazon of a wife. She was small, Akuna was, not so much in height as in bone structure, and she was not at all dark. Her skin, that kind of pale brown color one gets after putting too much milk in chocolate. Her eyes were large like her father's, but open and translucent. Their brownness always had a special glow when she was happy and excited, and when she was sad, the glimmer disappeared. She had not developed the red crisscrosses which her father had in the whites of his eyes, but Ezekiel knew that, except for the fact that she promised to be a fairly tall woman. His daughter was his very image. He had named her Akuna, meaning literally father's wealth, knowing that the only consolation he could count on from her would be her bride price. To him, this was something to look forward to. Akuna, on her part, was determined not to let her father down. She was going to marry well, a rich man of whom her father would approve, and who she would be able to afford an expensive bride price. She would have her marriage, first of all, solemnized by the beautiful goddess of Ibuza. Then the Christians would sing her a wedding march. Here comes the bride. Then her father now would call up the spirits of his great-great-grandparents to guide her. Then after all that, and only after all that, she would leave her father's house. But on this hot day, when the sun was pouring its merciless fire onto the unprotected heads of children coming home from school, when the heat was so intense the ground looked as though it had been cooked and then baked, when the heat ate its way through the shoeless feet of Africans padding their various ways to their various destinations, when the air was so still, so waterless, so juiceless, that perspiration had to pour from the bodies of humans to neutralize the temperature, Akuna forgot all thoughts of her bride price and felt a kind of closeness to which she could not give name, binding her to her father. I'm going to leave it there, but check out the book when you can.